Hello and welcome to Cruising and Musing. This is going to be a relatively short video where I talk about what I think should be done with student loan forgiveness. First off, hit the subscribe button, leave me a comment, give me a like, what have you, so I have a reason to keep doing what I'm doing. But, we have a question in front of us of should we forgive student loan debt? And, it's a pretty good question. And, there's very good points on both sides. Student loans are predatory. They're letting kids that are 18 years old start signing up for a huge amount of debt that we would never approve them for otherwise. That is being guaranteed by the government, which is why they're getting approved for the debt, and now they're not paying it back. They're not holding up the promises they kept. At the same time, it's a predatory lending practice. You're taking people who don't understand what they're signing up for and tricking them into signing on the dotted line. It ain't right. On the flip side, it also ain't right to expect working class Americans to pay for, college bills that were paid with student loans by, some upper middle class kid who ran up a bill without getting a useful degree and now, can't get a job or never finish it. So where I come down on this is that whether it's 10,000, whether it's an interest forgiveness, where they just forgive the interest and fees and penalties that have been accrued, but not the principal amount, and you have to pay that back like it was a zero interest loan, or they do $50,000 each, let's say, even. I can forgive that if we limit the payoff to people who went to public schools and to people who've got no more than a 4-year degree. So let's say you went to school and you got a 6-year degree. The loans you took out for the 4-year degree, the bachelor's degree, that gets paid for. The 2 extra years of loans you took out for the master's degree, we don't pay for that, even if you went to a public school. Why? Because that's on you. You got taken once and you went back for more. That's on you. And I also stress public school, not private school, because of the cost differential. Like I went to public school in state, and I paid something like $200 per credit hour. And I had scholarships. You go out of state to some private school, you might be spending $1,300 per credit hour, $1,200 per credit hour, and you could have stayed home and gotten the same education. What you got going to that other school was you were either paying for the name of that school, and if you were going into a business where that matters, you're probably not looking at having your loans paid off by someone else. They've probably been paid off and you're probably making 6 figures right now. Or you were deciding to go to this school because of non-educational reasons, and that's on you. You're making that deliberate choice to go to the more expensive school for no reason other than your own enjoyment of the campus life you thought you were going to have. So that's on you. Or your parents that insist that you went to that school and you let them pressure you into it. So, yeah, that's my take on that. I definitely think that if we do student loan forgiveness, we need to couple that with an overhaul of the system. Federal student loans should only be available to students going to public schools. Public schools who have sports programs should be absolutely outlawed and audited from subsidizing their sports programs with tuition costs and all the little fees they add on. If your football team's not good enough to pay for all of its own expenses, then it doesn't need to have the extra things. You don't need to be flying college football players around on jet planes when they could be riding a bus. You just don't. Not unless they're good enough and pull enough money to pay for themselves. In fact, we all know that college football is one of the biggest money businesses in the world. The sports program should be underwriting the cost of tuition for the students that aren't athletes. Going beyond that, we need to audit all those public institutions and go through with some clip and shears and remove all this bloated administration. Just like with public school, the bulk of the cost increase per student isn't in teachers and student costs. It's in administrative costs, in administrative positions that get invented. You don't need to have 3 secretaries for 3 different things when 1 secretary will do. You don't need to have an entire department going for something else that gets instituted to chase money for something that shouldn't be. Like, take a long, hard look at these administrative things that are running up the costs. When there's a department that wasn't there 10 years ago that now costs the school $30 million a year to sustain, maybe we should be looking at that and cutting that so you can lower your tuition so that the kids going there to get educations to become professionals don't have to pay so much to subsidize that $30 million administrative office. And when we're back at it, when we're building these things, I don't need to have brutalistic, severe, absolute utilitarian architecture, but let's make sure that, we're keeping the taxpayer dollar in mind. You don't need to have a giant walnut oak desk when I walk into your office. You can make do with a giant IKEA pressboard desk like the rest of us. If you want a big fancy desk, pay for it yourself. You don't get to have an office design and budget on my tuition dollars. That's not right. So yeah, that's my take on student loan forgiveness. It should be to a limited number of people for a limited number of things, only up to bachelor's degrees. Should only be for public school, people who went to public colleges. And if we do this, we need to address the broken system as a whole. And I'm going to close this on the note that I really don't think that you're going to actually get any student loan forgiveness. I think this is going to continue to be a game that they play where they're going to keep kicking the start of repayment down the line, hoping that some Republican will jump on that grenade and let it, go back into repayment on the Republicans' watch, not on Biden's or another Democrats. And I do think that, what you're going to see is they're talking about student loan forgiveness now because of the way the polls were looking. And, you're going to see it be a talking point all through the summer during the primaries. And then you're going to see it continue to be a talking point in the fall when the election happens. And as soon as we're done with the election, it's going to disappear again, the same way it did in 2020. As soon as Biden got into office, if he really wanted to do something about student loans, he could have done it. The whole writing a letter for the Secretary of State to never, or Education to never write him back about a decision on whether or not he could do stuff with his executive orders. That's a delay tactic. That's bullshit. That's to make it look like you're doing something. He didn't need a letter of recommendation from his Secretary of Health or anyone else to start violating your rights with further lockdown orders or vaccine mandates or anything like that, or overturning the previous executive orders that were benefiting people. So the idea that he needs to ask permission to do it for this one thing, not there. It's not a thing. That's a delay tactic so they don't have to deal with it. That's so they can say, oh, well, we're in the process without lying about it. So I wouldn't hold your breath on it. I really wouldn't. Those of you who do have student loans, make sure that you're in communication with the Department of Education. If you're working for, the city, you're working for the public, make sure you're checking your eligibility for the public servant loan forgiveness. It's $15,000 off the top, better than nothing. Damn better sight than nothing. In fact, it's more than even the $10,000 they're talking about at times. And be prepared to fight for it. And that's one of the things that we could fix. We could make it easier to get that public servant loan forgiveness. And teachers, if you're teaching in, a high needs area, don't forget to, be in communication about whether or not you qualify now to start counting towards years for the teacher loan forgiveness, which was one of the ways I got tricked into going to school to be a teacher specifically, instead of getting a different degree, was the idea that I could come out of school, work in a high needs area, and get my loans completely forgiven. Now they make it so that you've got more hoops to jump through for that than anyone really, don't need to for that kind of assistance. But, it is what it is. And, reach out and do that. It's been, fun being frank with you. I am Rob. This is Cruising and Musing. Subscribe, comment, like, dislike if you feel the need. And let's leave it at that.